Anybody that just got added in, hello, we're doing bread. I was just getting some of the ingredients together, and we're started off with just following the recipe that we got, that we emailed around to everybody. So I put into this big bowl 550 grams of warm water. So that's 3 cups. So now I've got my yeast. I find that 7 or 8 grams of yeast is plenty. It doesn't seem to make that much difference in my baking. So I'm just, the scale is not the most accurate. But again, I don't really care all that much. Just as long as it's within a gram, that's probably a little more than I want. Okay, so I'm just adding that to the water, and that's nice and warm. This yeast just seems to want to clump a little bit, so I just kind of mix it a little bit. You can't really go wrong. Once it hits the warm water, it gets started anyway.
Hey, I have another question, Joe.
Yeah.
So I had to get instant yeast because there was no active dry yeast.
Yep.
Do you think you would add it at the same time, or would you?
Yeah, you're talking about like the ones in the little packets?
Well, actually, mine's like a 1 pound thing, but it's instant rather than active dry.
To be honest, I've not noticed that much difference. I think that ultimately, like I did a little bit of bread making with a French friend of mine. He's not a bread maker per se, but he was really avid about it. And they use different kinds of yeast there, and you can definitely taste the difference in the flavor of the bread. But in terms of like the action and stuff, I haven't really noticed that much difference. I bought the bulk packets. I bought bags like this. I bought those little pouches. They all seem to work about the same, so I think you'll be fine. It's going to have so much time tonight to get wet and going and stuff like that. That's one of the benefits of doing like a Poolish this way. Okay, so I have my 550 of water in here. I got my 7 grams of yeast. I'm just using a different bowl. Weigh my flour in. This is kind of the beauty of weighing flours. You don't have to sift it or anything like that. You just go on scale. So I'm just going to do 500 grams. I think. Big giant bag. Thanks for our friend Julie Croonan. This is about 9 cups of flour. That's 506. That's close enough. Like I said, we'll be fine tuning it. Okay, so you've got your 550 or whatever, if you're doing the half recipe, into the bowl. You've got your yeast. Like I can already smell that yeast just the tiniest bit. You can already feel that it's being activated. And then I'm just gonna pour the flour in and mix it, and just being a little careful when I start mixing it, just to not throw flour everywhere. But otherwise, there's not much technique. It should be wet enough. I'm just kind of cutting it to make sure that it's all wetted. I'm throwing a little flour. And then, it should be pretty wet. You can see here, like it's still pretty soupy. It hasn't quite all absorbed. And I don't think you can make a lot of mistakes on this. You could do more water. You wouldn't want it to go a lot drier than this. And all you got to do is, figure out what works for you if you're doing a half recipe, and then just kind of write it down and keep track. We're going to add, the other portion of the water and the other portion of the flour tomorrow. So now I'm just kind of going to stir for a little while. I just want to make sure that all of that yeast and all the flour is kind of like evenly mixed. You don't want to have, a big pocket with a bunch of flour that didn't have any yeast around it. But this will get kneaded again tomorrow. So even that process is going to be pretty straightforward. Okay. So hopefully you guys are all, and it should be, this is pretty wet. You can see it's already starting to be a little bit gluteny. You can see it kind of starting to hang together a little bit. So it's, maybe like pancake batter, somewhere in that range. Again, it doesn't make all that much difference as long as you can basically get the lumps out, and I'm probably about done. I washed my hands, so I don't mind using them. We're going to use them throughout this process anyway. Kind of getting it down off of the sides. So I have it all down on the bottom. And then we're going to let this sit overnight. While it's doing that, the yeast is going to start growing, multiplying, eating some of the flour, getting activated by the water and the warmth and everything, and then producing all these bubbles. So by the time we come down tomorrow, this will have risen up, maybe to the top of the bowl almost, and be real light and puffy. I mean, nothing that you would be able to like pick up or work. And at this point, like all you really need is a lid that will fit, on top of this. You don't need a real tight fitting lid. You don't even want a tight fitting lid because it's going to be producing gas. And so it will be kind of, it would lift that lid off. And I'm just taking, like, I keep a few towels special just for bread making that are just a regular towel, like not a terry cloth, which has a little too much lint, but basically just, any old kind of clean kitchen towel.
Hey, Joe.
A little bit small, yeah.
Before you uncover that, could you bring it closer to the camera while stirring so we can all see the texture? Because I'm doing a half recipe and I want to make sure that mine is actually appropriately thin, because mine seems thicker than yours.
Okay, well, you can add another, if you're doing cups, add another half cup of water or 50 grams of water, and just remember to take it off tomorrow.
Okay.
It's pretty.
I mean, I don't know. You can. I don't know if you can kind of see if that
batter
seems okay, or if that also seems kind of too thick.
You could add a little water to it to kind of help it out a little bit. Because some of that water will still keep getting absorbed, and it's nice to. I find that it's kind of nice to be sort of soupy. So you could add, if you're doing weight, you could add another 50 grams. If you're doing cups, add another quarter cup, something like that, and then just remember to add that much less.
What do you think about letting it sit overnight in a stainless steel bowl as opposed to ceramic?
That's fine. You could do either. I do glass sometimes. I don't think it makes that much difference, to be honest. I don't think it interacts with it. What I was going to suggest, like I do notice a little bit of difference. Hang on one second. I do notice a little bit of difference based on what temperature it is. And here in Wisconsin, anyway, it's kind of like a cool spring day. It's 52 degrees outside. The countertop is, cool to the touch. It's not cold, but it's cool compared to summertime. So in summertime, I would just do a countertop rise overnight and for all the dough rising. And I would also probably do rises of only like an hour and a half. That's all it would really need. Today, what I'll probably do is just stick it in the oven behind me, not with the oven on, but it's just kind of a warmish space, and let it rise there overnight. And then we'll do slightly longer rises tomorrow of like an hour and 40 minutes or so for it to get kind of fluffy. But otherwise, we're basically done. I mean, so we've just mixed up our 3 ingredients. We're just sitting down the bottom of the bowl, cover the bowl. I've got my lid. It just sort of sits on top. And so I'm just kind of pressing it into place just to make sure, that towel is covering it, but that's about it. I mean, it's not really like a tight fitting lid or anything. And yeah, go ahead, switch the camera.
Hey, Joe, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I have a recipe for a boule that I make in just in about a 3-hour period of time. And it's like a big crusty version of what you're doing. And there's this process where you like boil a pan of water. So it's boiling water. And then you put that pan in the oven with the bread to rise. So it's like this steamy, risey place.
Yeah. I do that for the bake for sure. And we can talk about that. It actually kind of paradoxically, if you put a lot of humidity in the oven when you bake it, it actually makes the crust be a lot more that kind of nice, crunchy, classic, crispy, baguette crust. So I haven't done the one that you're talking about doing humidity during the rise, but it will be great. I mean, keeping it warm. Sometimes I'll even like turn on the oven to 200 for like 1 minute and just make sure it's kind of warm in there, like if I'm baking in winter. So I haven't done that, but it'd be good from a humidity and just from a warmth perspective. So, yeah.
That's cool. I also want to know, are you wearing pants?
Let's see. Yes, but
okay, that's all I wanted to know. I just needed to know that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm just gonna,
No. But I have a question. Where do you keep it? Outside in the cold or in the kitchen?
Yes, got it.
Boulanger, where do you put the mix now? Do you leave it in the kitchen or outside on the porch where it's colder?
The Poolish itself, what we just mixed up?
Yeah.
You can put it in the oven if you're not going to use it and just leave it off. You could just leave it on the countertop. I wouldn't leave it outside. Some people will do like multi-day kinds of Poolishes, and then it starts to get almost pretty close to sourdough, and then you can leave it in the fridge. And I used to do some where you would leave it in the fridge, but I feel like I've never had any problems with like the flavor or anything else leaving it out. And it seems like it gets rising faster and better tomorrow rather than having a cold dough. So I'm always looking for that baguette texture with like a lot of big holes and a lot of big spaces and that real kind of shiny, gluteny interior. And that seems to work better with a room temperature Poolish.
Grazie.
Ooh, I have a question.
Hi, Cliff. Yes.
Hey, Joe. Hey, is there any danger that the rising whatever you call it is going to stick to the towel?
Yeah, it happens to me sometimes. Like if I use a sort of a smaller bowl, sometimes it will. You can use like a big tall pot, but it doesn't matter that much either. Like if your towel is clean, which it has to be anyway, then it'll stick to the bottom of it, but then it'll fall. Like it'll do a rise for, I don't know, probably 3 hours and then stick to the bottom, but then it'll fall again. You'll get up in the morning, you'll peel the towel off and it'll have this big like spot of Poolish on it, but it's no big deal. I just wash it down the drain or whatever and keep moving. So it doesn't really matter that much.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Joe?
Yes.
Hi. And this recipe is good for keto also?
Yeah, Monica, I'm talking to my friend Monica Navarro. Hello, Monica, hola, who lives in Quito, and she's higher elevation. I used almost the exact same recipe, Monica, in high elevation. The only thing that I had ever read that I thought was actually pretty interesting was somebody that said that when you add salt, it's good for the flavor, but salt also slows down the yeast a little bit. And if anything, in high elevation, the problem is that the yeast goes so fast that the bread explodes instead of stretches. And so I usually add a little bit more salt. I'll try to remember tomorrow to mention that, but I think we had, in this big double recipe, we had 28 grams of salt, and you could probably do, 35 grams or something like that. It didn't seem that much. I mean, I've used the exact same recipe, and it works fine. So that's just a suggestion if you don't mind the extra salt.
Remind me tomorrow.
Okay, yeah, we'll do. It's good to hear your voice. All right, so normally we leave it for like 12 hours, but again, it doesn't matter that much. Like if you wanted to get up at 5 in the morning and make bread, you could. We're set for tomorrow at 10, just so everybody can like sleep in and have eggs and bacon or, lamb burgers or whatever you're having at home. And then we'll get started then. Does anybody have any other questions or preguntas? Hello, Jen.
So dry towel or damp towel?
Mine's dry. Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Who gets a prize?
Well, you all get a prize of like a nice, warm, fluffy, delicious baguette. Hopefully, if you don't have any in the house, you will be laying in a delicate assortment of cheeses and wine glasses, and the wine to go in it. Yeah.
Hey,
Okay,
Joe.
Yeah.
Joe, can I see your consistency again?
Sure. Let's see.
Chris, can I click on him and make him big? How do I make you big?
Speaker view. As big as I can get.
This is your technologically lame sister-in-law.
That's all right. My brother's video was awesome.
I know. Well, I was a camera girl on that one. Oh,
nice.
that's
There you go.
super soupy.
Yeah,
Mine doesn't look like that.
it's setting a little bit, like you can see it coming off the spoon,
Mine's not like that. If it's thicker, should I add more water?
Yeah, you could add another quarter cup of water and just remember to, take it off of what you're going to add tomorrow. I like a real wet Poolish. I'm not exactly sure why, but like I can already see, I've just gone from flour, but if you look at what this looks like already, it's already having this really nice kind of elastic consistency. Remember I was talking about, we're almost like making a balloon that's full of flour. And so that elasticity is really nice. And that Poolish seems to me to really give you a good, balloon skin. So if you get it a little bit wetter, yeah, I think it's a little better.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm just gonna cover this back up. Make sure my towel's in place. I mean, I just don't want it drying out overnight, so that's why I'm kind of putting the combination of the towel and the lid. But again, like it's not real tight fitting or anything.
Hey, Joe. Joe?
Yeah.
I know when I shared my Google Doc about my sourdough with you, just to let you know, like, I think this Poolish and the leaven that I make is exactly the same consistency. Like, the exact thing that you're telling us. It's just so you know if you ever do that recipe.
Nice, yeah, I want to. I've never really done a lot of sourdough. I tried once leaving a Poolish for like 36 hours to see if it got more sour, and it got different texture, different flavored. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't sourdough either. So I'd like to try a real sourdough. It'd be fun.
Yeah, you can have some of my starter.
Fun, yay. Okay, everybody, so that's lesson 1 of the real authentic French baguettes. We will see everybody tomorrow at 10 a.m. Tomorrow we're gonna need, more flour, no more yeast, we're done with that. You'll need more water, you'll need salt, doesn't matter, it could be any kind of salt, like I use kosher salt, but it could be regular table salt or anything that will dissolve nicely. We'll need some more mixing bowls and stuff like that. You can use the same bowl to keep the dough in, or you can use a different one. You'll have to wash it, obviously. And then I'm going to use like a knife. This is a sort of a special kitchen knife. You can use a regular old knife to cut it with. We're going to use a little bit more flour, in the process. We're going to need some more towels to cover the dough with, and then also to lay it out on, unless you're using bread forming pans. And and then we're gonna when we make the dough next time and we put it in whatever bowl we're gonna let it rise in, we're gonna use a little oil or butter on the inside of the bowl, and that wasn't on the list. So grab, it could be olive oil, could be butter, whatever you like. It's just a tiny bit to keep it from sticking. So that's what we'll need tomorrow. We'll see you at 10 o'clock, and happy baking.
Bye.
Bye.